This is the Office Memo, where we talk about podcasting for businesses. Branded podcast, internal podcast, and recruitment podcast, but social business and digital transformation will be passing by. Everything you need to create a better engagement with your employees and generate a lasting connection with your customers and clients. 2 years later than expected, the podcast show London finally arrived. The biggest podcast conference in Europe, so of course I bought a ticket as soon as they became available. On the 25th of May, I stood in line to go in at the Business Design Centre in London. Upon entrance, you were immediately greeted by two very big players, Spotify on the left side, Amazon Music on the right. The big hall was packed with stands, with industry leaders, production companies, equipment, and so many creative-looking people. Together with Guardian Podcast, the organization created an app where you can create your own schedule and mark which talks and presentations you would like to attend. So my first talk I attended was by James Cridland, Editor-in-Chief of Podnews, my go-to source for all podcast information. He talked about the future of podcasting, how it started only 15 years ago and that now as a teenager and maturing, it has to decide how the industry will grow into adulthood. Big media companies, big streaming services are seeing the increased advertisement revenue and all want to get a piece of the pie. A large piece. Preferably the whole pie. We as indie podcasters and independent podcast production companies need to stick together to make sure there is still room for all of us in the future. So yes, podcasting is still a very young industry, and it has always been a way for everyone to express themselves, be creative, share information and knowledge. We now have to mature in a way to bring better quality podcasts, but also keep being creative, telling stories in a way that sets us apart from others in our niche. I couldn't think of a better way to start this 2-day conference. My goal for this conference was to see what new things I could learn in my area of expertise that could benefit my clients. So the focus was on branded podcasts, advertisements, and subscriptions. I did attend a few keynotes from Amazon Music about the company going global with podcasts, especially focusing on the local market, and Spotify's keynote with Anchor former director who talked a bit about the history of Anchor, their integration with Spotify, and what the future holds. I won't bore you with the details of all the talks and presentations I attended. Instead, I'm going to give you 5 takeaways from my point of view. Number 1. Spotify wants to provide a full package deal for podcasters, from recording to publishing, providing promotional materials, subscriptions, you name it. It seems like the perfect solution for beginning podcasters. My question is, will this be hindering the creativity of the podcaster or be beneficial? Because the editing possibilities on Anchor are limited. And let's not forget that the question of ownership remains. Who owns the content that you are creating and publishing? Number 2. Advertisement. The revenue from advertising on podcasts hit a total of $4.9 billion during 2021. Brands are finding their way to advertise on podcasts. Host-read advertisement is still one of the best ways to approach this. Because a podcast host is usually trusted, therefore the brand that they are mentioning could be trusted as well. Number 3. Subscriptions and paid content are going to grow even bigger. Apple Podcasts and Spotify are expanding the possibilities, and Apple Podcasts even promotes the content behind the paywall. Patreon is another big player when it comes to offering paid bonus content. The engagement with your audience can be one of the driving factors to choose to create a 3-tier option at Patreon. Many podcasters have raved about the personal connection they have now that they know exactly who is listening instead of only seeing numbers in their analytics. Number 4, YouTube will announce a podcast option in the next months. According to statistics, YouTube has surpassed Apple Podcasts and Spotify as the place for people to listen to podcasts. Statistics also show that people will use YouTube as a search engine, find a podcast, and continue to listen to the podcast via their favorite podcast player. So make sure your content is available on YouTube. It is a definite must. Number 5. A regular interview-style podcast may not be the way to go for your branded podcast. An interview with the CEO is boring and not something people will listen to in their spare time. Creativity is necessary and finding the right people to work with. If you do not have the expertise in-house, find the right production company. Be creative in your niche, combine different styles, and always keep your listener in mind. These are the main points for me that I took away from the 2-day conference. The event was a success. However, there were a few things that could be improved. There were many talks, but some at the same time. So that means that I had to choose and only the main stages were recorded, and hopefully we will get the replays, although I haven't really read about that anywhere yet. To me, the gems were in the smaller stages, and it's a shame I won't have the replay for the ones I could not attend, or watch again the ones that I did. I'm willing to pay a little extra for the ticket if they would be able to give this option next year. Also, yes, it is the podcast show London, but I was a little disappointed that the focus was almost solely on the UK market. Statistics, talks were mostly in the direction of UK podcasters, while the organization claimed it would be an international festival for podcasting. I'm sure that there are great podcasters in the rest of the EU that are highly successful and have lots of insights to share. So yes, next year I'm definitely going back. It was great to be surrounded by fellow podcasters in the business, surprisingly, of all ages, genders, and ethnicity. It is sometimes lonely working from home in a town where I still have to explain what a podcast is. I wouldn't mind talking to my peers more often, exchange ideas, and get inspired. For now, I will try to do that with some of the connections I made during the event and go back next year to the podcast show London. Many thanks for listening. We hope you liked the episode. If you want to start a podcast with our assistance, please feel free to contact us at info@lagerservices.com. Until next time.